YC has this thing called demo day, which is where you basically pitch your end deliverable that you have at the end of the 3 months to all the VCs that they invite. So everyone is there. We had really great traction just within the 3 months. So we raised another $4 million coming out of Y Combinator, which was awesome. That's when Will Smith and Kevin Durant came in, and that really set us up to do
Welcome, everyone, to Adapt or Die Transformative Leadership Conversations. This is the show where I invite executive founders or board members or just interesting people to talk about those moments in business and in life where they either had to pivot or they had to perish. My name is Andreas Pettersson. I'm a former tech CEO that turned into executive coach, and today I lead Leaders Adapt. Today's guest is Stella Han, and Stella is an amazing and very inspiring woman who is driving a tech startup. Welcome to the show, Stella.
Thank you, Andreas. Excited to be here.
Tell me a little bit about how did you even get into this? Tell me your background story, why real estate, why helping other people raise capital. I mean, we all stumble on it, things for different reasons, but please, I would love to hear your story.
Amazing. Well, it's so interesting just thinking back about how I got here. It feels like everything is planned, but it actually isn't. So I grew up in the Bay Area. Both of my parents are software engineers by trade, but I think just part of the Asian culture, right? We like physical things. They like to, you know, hold on to things that is tangible and realistic. So obviously, that meant real estate. So I pretty much grew up being the cheap family labor where my parents ran their, side project actually flipping houses in the Bay Area. And I spent a lot of my weekends, covering my nose and, painting stuff at the house, watching over the contractors. We joke that, Home Depot is our Disneyland, but, that was pretty much the environment that I grew up in and certainly didn't love it as a kid, but I think it definitely, left a seed in me in terms of how I thought about personal finances and also just how I really saw my parents take their destiny in their own hands. They had a W-2 job that brought stable money, but at the same time, they wanted to build, additional wealth, create something for me, for the family, and that meant a lot. So career-wise, I actually ended up going down a similar path. I studied computer science, went to Carnegie Mellon, and then came out of that joining a firm which was a very fast growing startup. And I think just part of me really wanted to be an entrepreneur, just seeing what my parents were doing. But I am a very methodical person. I am not the type to just do something for the sake of doing it. So I was like, well, I don't think I'm ready to start something right now. Let me go join a rocket ship where I can, have exponential growth in something that is growing super quickly itself. So joined a firm as a software engineer and grew a ton there. And at the same time, pretty much the first paycheck I got, I was already thinking, how do I build my own real estate portfolio? I want to do what my parents did. That clearly worked out. And unfortunately, now it costs millions of dollars to buy a shack in the Bay Area. And that's not, any money that a new grad software engineer would have. So started just hearing from everyone about out of state investing. That sounded really intriguing, but I was really intimidated. I never really stepped foot outside of Bay Area and Pittsburgh. That's really the only two places I've been. And I was really scared about investing out of state in places that I've never been and just felt a lot of hesitation. I was really overwhelmed and personally had my breakthrough moment when I found a few partners in all these different communities that I was in. And they were, really open to having me join them and do a deal together where one, I didn't have to put down, all my, little life savings into buying one whole house for myself. We got to split the down payment, which meant a whole lot to me. And the more important thing was just feeling like I had people who knew what they were doing that had my back, where now the first deal doesn't feel all that scary, right? So that's how I went from 0 to 1, and it was such a game changer. And I love talking about things. I started telling all my coworkers at work like what I'm up to and just started hearing a lot of people share similar sentiments. They're like, "Yeah, like that's such a no-brainer." And people told me, they used to half joke with all their college friends about buying properties together. And that was when I started having, some light bulb moments where it's like, okay, it seems like partnerships is what people want to do. It's just, all the legal complexities, the actual logistics of running things as a group. that seems really complicated. So while that thought is in the back of my head, I'm still continuing to grow my portfolio. And now I'm starting to get to a point where, I'm only multifamily, smaller ones, and I'm trying to go bigger and I'm out of my own money, right? So now I start thinking, okay, well, these are what my partners did. They recruited me. So can I do the same thing? I want to raise money. And all my coworkers, all my friends, they've been hearing about what I've been doing. They want to join me, but none of these people are accredited investors. No one's super rich and can give me, 200 grand. But, people had 10K, 20K, 50K, for example. And I got a lot of, verbal interest. And it was like, oh my gosh, 50 of my friends want to do this with me. I have no idea how to put this all together. So we ended up finding a lawyer. I was doing a bunch of accounting and back office work myself, and it was just so, so chaotic. And I was like, wow, I did not sign up for this. I thought we were here to buy a portfolio. Why am I dealing with all this chaos? And the software engineer, the builder in me was just, okay, there's got to be a solution. We got to bring tech into this. We can streamline and just create, a way better ecosystem to actually deliver something efficiently that's clearly bring value. So that was really the big moment where I founded Fractional as a company, brought in one of my friends, one of my teammates at a firm who was doing this with me. We decided to co-found the company together. So here we are, helping operators go bigger and actually involve their network into doing deals together with them.
I love the part of the story here where you just keep taking action forward, and then by keep being curious, you just keep stumble on the next idea and the next thing and the next thing. With that said, you didn't go just from, hey, let's start this company to, oh, we transacted over $400 million. Like, tell me a little bit about some of the early days and how did you go from sort of idea into where you felt like this is actually a company that I believe in?
Yeah, so I am not a super risky person. I like to make sure I generally see where things are going before I go full, into it. So when we just started having this idea, it wasn't like, okay, we have an idea. Let's quit our jobs at a firm and just go do it. It was more, let's actually prove that we're onto something. So my co-founder Carlos and I, we basically built kind of like a fake website, just the landing page of what we were imagining, but obviously no actual features or product behind it, just explaining our vision. And we thought, okay, who's our target audience? And we thought other software engineers, other professionals in tech, because that's what we're in. And all our friends are telling us that they want to do this with us. So we posted our landing page, fake website on this app called Blind, which is where a lot of techies are gossiping about their employers and their salaries and things like that. But, we know they're there, right? So we share our website and 2,000 people signed up to be on the wait list.
Crazy.
And that's when we were like, holy shit, we're definitely onto something. This isn't just, an us imagining a problem. People actually want this. So we applied a Y Combinator with, the proof that there is demand for this. And obviously, us having personally gone through the experience of trying to raise capital, putting it all together from our friends, they really loved, what we're doing. They felt like there was founder market fit. So after we got into Y Combinator, this is winter batch of 2021, that's when Carlos and I were like, okay, we have enough validation. We have some venture capital money to make sure, we're not going to be homeless or anything like that. Like, let's go do it. Let's take the leap of faith and make something happen. So that's how we went from zero to first baby step.
Tell me, for people who are interested, they have an idea. Tell me a little bit about how the process work with Y Combinator and some of these other incubators. How do you get into them? What's the number one advice you would tell a listener listening to this podcast to do?
Yep. So Y Combinator, they are a 3-month accelerator where you pretty much go from idea to VC backed business by the end of the 3 months. And you just apply online. If they like your idea, they'll do a 10-minute interview with you and then they decide if they want to give you a small check to start your company. And I would say, as my number one advice, I think is what is most important is figuring out where do you have a unique advantage to be the solution to the problem, which is generally this, founder market fit kind of idea. I think that is super important because the solution, what you think might be it, could just be totally different later. But if you do have that founder market fit where you have, maybe even contrarian insights, for example, right? Like that gives you such a unique edge to be able to pivot quickly, to be able to iterate and actually deliver something that people want. And that to me is the most powerful thing.
The proof point basically, and having some early traction, early adopters, or just a massive interest. I'm with you. I think everyone can have great ideas, but if you actually validate it before you start pitching it, and we both know this, one problem, many solutions. I think it's amazing. But okay, so you get into Y Combinator, you do the 3 months. Tell me, how did you go from there to being like properly funded and accelerating this company?
Yep, so coming out of YC, that was a huge moment for us. YC has this thing called Demo Day, which is where you basically pitch your end deliverable that you have at the end of the 3 months to all the VCs that they invite. So everyone is there. We had really great traction just within the 3 months. So we raised another $4 million coming out of Y Combinator, which was awesome. That's when Will Smith and Kevin Durant came in, and that really set us up to do a lot of the initial product building and getting, essentially our first wave of customers. At that point, we were very focused on this concept of community. That's when we really identified that our unique DNA is people who believe in community-based investing. So we went after, Asian real estate investing groups, real estate agents who invest, all sorts of these kind of tight-knit circles of people who want to do business with each other, but, traditionally only just talk about it in their group chat or in their meetings, but have actually no way of making the dollars happen together. So that's where, we found early product market fit. The venture backing was obviously great for credibility and also being able to build a team. That was another thing is now that we have capital, it felt like we were really unlocking a new level of scalability where it wasn't just me and Carlos, punching away at our laptops. It's like, okay, this is real now. Like we're bringing other people who are bought in on our mission and, want to make this vision happen with us. So we're, building a team for the first time as well, which is very interesting. And yeah, it went very well. The markets are really good. So things were, taking off, and that led us to our Series A, and things were good. And then we started, the markets started fluctuating, interest rates, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we'll get into that in just a bit. And, that's really when a lot of the crazy started happening was when the markets started to shift. And, we've had to make a lot of major adjustments. And now feel like, we kind of landed on a new world that we're unlocking, which is very exciting. So can definitely share more about that.
Yeah, but exactly. Tell me more. I want to hear about the challenge because every time I listen to a founder on another podcast, and I'm not trashing anyone, I'm just a beginner here. But what I learn is I always hear the success story. And I don't think the success story in itself and like just do this and if you just do A, B, and C, you're going to become a multi-billionaire. Like, tell me about that situation where it's like a high pressure situation, you're frustrated, or the team is really been debating something, or you realize like, okay, we have a major issue on our hands, or we have to do something very differently. Walk me through that scenario. Who is in the room? Who's leading the conversation? And how do you even attack such a situation?
Yeah, that is a phenomenal question. So we really had our pivotal moment as a company in terms of the biggest decision and the biggest shift that we've made late last year, going
Mhm.
into early this year. And what happened was, pretty much all the way up till that point for the last, 3-ish years, we were a very consumer community oriented company, right? Like we wanted to promote engagement. We built our products around that as well. We were building a lot of, Facebook features, for example. Like we wanted people to talk to each other. We wanted them to learn with each other. And that's where our focus was is how do we up level the broader consumer so that they can find people that they want to partner with, learn about new strategies, and then eventually deploy a $5,000 check. But that is I think consumer is a very different type of beast, which we were trying to, figure out for 3 years. And once the market started shifting, the consumer mentality becomes very different, right? Now they're very nervous. The interest rates keeps going up and up. All the deals that worked before now don't work. And pivoting a broader consumer market is not something that happens just like this. It takes a really long time. We're trying a bunch of different things, but it just wasn't moving. Not at least not at the speed of, a Silicon Valley startup type of expectation where you're always looking for exponential hockey stick growth, right? So that was when I think internally, right, everybody has their little bit of a red alarm kind of moment where we're like, okay, what do we do now? Like, this isn't what we're expecting. And what was really hard was my co-founder, Carlos, he and I think we had a 6-hour conversation to figure this out, and his thesis was, "Okay, maybe we should focus more on the operators. Let's bring in more operators who have their own network, and let's basically dedicate all of the team's resources on bringing in more operators instead of focusing on our consumer product." And we had another community that we were running internally within Fractional called Accelerate, where it's almost kind of like a Y Combinator concept where we were bringing in aspiring real estate investors, putting them in this like 3-month program and educating them and hoping that they'd come out of it doing their first investment, and people paid a subscription to be in that program. So that was a solid baseline line of revenue, right? So that was something that worked. It wasn't exponential, but it at least worked. And having that conversation, like, do we drop something that is at least working, that is guaranteeing a baseline amount of stability for a bigger bet that could potentially, double, triple, maybe even 10x the business, right? That was a big decision that we had to make, and this goes back to me not being super risky as a person. It was really hard for me to find that conviction, at least within that 6-hour session, but I'm really glad we had it. I think it was a very rip off the Band-Aid moment. We're a startup, we're here to take risk and make big moves, so after that, kind of just slept on it a little bit and, revisited the early signals of what we were seeing and just decided, okay, it's adapt or die, right? So
Pivots. Yeah.
yeah, we decided to pivot, and that has definitely changed the game for us as a company this year.
How did you deal with all the doubters? I mean, did you have doubters internally except for you, the founders, or the board, or your investors? Tell me a little bit about that. Or everyone was like, yeah, sure, let's go.
So when we made the pivot, we didn't have doubters, which was great.
Hmm.
And that was because we had one early signal that came from a major client and community. Pace came on board. And I mean, Pace has been on our dream list of someone we wanted to work with. And, I'm personally in sub 2 as well. So that in itself was such a great data point that when we decided to make the switch, it was like, "Okay, let's all do it. We have to give this a shot. We already have one case that we think is going to work really well for us. Why don't we just double down on something that looks like it has a 10x potential rather than something that's kept us alive, but, has been kind of a plateau move for a while." So,
You're
that
not
was really
gonna
nice.
you're not gonna get away from this story that easy, Stella. I'm really sorry, but I have heard you tell that story in a very different way. Tell me how you got Pace, and tell me what your contributions were, because I think there's a lot of other founders out there that needs to hear this.
Yeah, the Pace story is crazy. So, I am personally in sub 2, so I'm a member of Pace's community. And, we wanted to work with Pace for a very long time. Obviously, Pace is amazing, super busy, has a ton on his plate. So before, it was just me sending him an email here and there asking if he's interested. And he probably gets a million emails every day, right? So it's like you would get one response out of 30 emails where Pace is like, "Oh, yeah, this is interesting," but nothing concrete, right? Which totally makes sense. Like I get a bunch of cold emails, I'm not responding to all of them, right? So in the same time, I am, working with more people within the sub 2 community who I have personal relationships, I'm developing relationships with. So, people like Alexis Morgan, who some folks might know, super young, brilliant founder. She's now doing raises, bring in her community, other people in Sub2 to do deals with her. And, we had a handful of other success cases of other members in Sub2, bringing in the community together to do deals with them. And then all that is happening, it's probably around 6 to 8 months of time has passed. And then I see that Pace is doing an in person raising capital event where he's teaching people about raising capital.
And for
And
the
it
listeners
is,
who don't know who Pace Morby is, can you explain a little bit more who he is, what's the type of following he has, and so on?
yeah, so Pace, he is the founder of Sub2, which is an amazing creative finance community. And Pace is, I think pretty much like the godfather of this concept of creative finance, right? Like he really brought that concept out to the world for real estate investors to understand. And he has a really community giving back kind of mindset where he wants to really up level people who don't have money, people who have never done deals before, to get them to do their first, real estate deal. And then there's a lot of people who have matured a lot within the community that also loves that concept and has believes in the same kind of vision, right? Of giving back, growing together, growing as a community. So that is why there is so much synergy with
And there's
Fractional and
probably
with
over
Sub2.
100,000 people, or at least in that group, right? Or
Yes. I think within the paid Sub2 group, there's 20,000. He's also got top tier TC, which is for transaction coordinators, Gator lending. So yeah, overall, definitely in the hundreds of thousands. And there's the public group as well, which has a ton of people. So yeah, it's a community that's
okay,
growing a ton.
back to the story. So you now know who this guy is. You have sort of their members have been doing deals for a while. But here is the beautiful thing that Stella did. So all listeners, pay attention now. What did you do?
Yeah, so Pace was having his in-person event, and I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'm gonna fly out there and just see if I can talk to him in person." So I booked my ticket for, I think it was literally the weekend after, flew out to Phoenix, and I'm sitting there in person in the session. I'm waiting to see when is Pace coming, and then he finally shows up during lunch. So I just, run over to him, try to stack him as quickly as I can. I'm like, "Hey, Pace, how's it going? Can I tell you what I've been up to recently?" And then, he's super nice. I tell him about all the deals that Alexis has been doing, all the deals that people in Sub2 have been doing on the platform. And Pace is like, "Wow, that is amazing." And, he disappears, gets some lunch, comes back, and he's like, "Actually, Stella, do you mind just teaching everyone in the room this afternoon about what fractional is? I think we can create so much value out of it." So that happened, which I totally was not expecting at all. But, it still feels like a K drama moment for me with what happened and went down.
I think the story here that I really want to make sure that any founder, CEO out there, you're trying to figure out how to sell your product. You don't really know what to do. You're spending a lot of time in marketing or whatever you're doing. Here's the thing, just take action. It's a sales effort. Stella clearly knew what she wanted. She took the risk, faced fear, went there, and started an amazing partnership.
Yep. There's you can only win if you take action, right? Even if Pace said no, then I would have gotten an answer for, maybe what I needed to do better or just where he felt like there wasn't enough synergy. So I think taking action is what gets you answers, and you need answers to figure out the next steps.
Where's Fractional going? And also, what do you think within your leadership is the one thing you have to work on and advance in order to get the company there?
Well, what is next is, I mean, one, we are really looking to, triple the amount of operators and essentially dollars invested on the platform. That is the near term, North Star kind of metric goal for us, which is super exciting. And we see, a very action oriented path towards getting there, which is really awesome. And for me, as a founder and, leadership skills that I'm working on, one, I am someone who likes to figure out things first for myself before dedicating it to someone else on the team. And I think one, it does help me just understand all the different parts of the business and what it takes better. But two, it does maybe create, it definitely does create a bit of a scaling issue. So that is something that I'll have to figure out how to transition as we keep growing and growing. So that's one part that I'm working on. And then the second one is I think just because of how we've been, a lean and powerful company and everyone is still really deep into it, I am very execution mode most of the time. So I'm also trying to, abstract away myself and, put myself in a 3,000 feet kind of view where I can start doing more, vision building and thought leadership and, things that will be more like directional and strategic that can, really set the basis for what's going to come next. That's not just, 3, 6 months down the line, but maybe, a year or two out. That is the next level that I want to achieve as a leader.
One, love the vulnerability. Two, for all the listeners who heard that answer, please notice Stella never talks in the sense of if and then. She always says when, or she always talks in the sense that she is going to do it. She just haven't done it yet. And I absolutely love that of how you frame everything. And then the third is that you have a clear path and you just know what it is. I think the reason why you have that ability is you are a person that slow down and reflect so you can go faster. And I meet a lot of founders who doesn't. They're on all the time. You take time to reflect and you build a plan and you communicate it to others as well.
Journaling, that's the one new thing that I'm really doing a lot more of and really appreciate that feedback from you, obviously, Andreas. But yeah, I do think it helps you be a lot more thoughtful and intentional with what you're doing.
It's been amazing to witness your growth. I want to get into a quick lightning round here. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. First thing that comes to your mind, unfiltered. It just is what it is. Okay.
All right. I'm a little scared, but we'll do it.
Okay. What leadership lesson did you learn the hard way?
I think sometimes less thinking, that is something that I learned is if something is reversible, if it's easily reversible, you gotta just pull the trigger faster. So that's something that I've learned the hard way is sometimes I just, sit on my butt and think a little too much and, it just might be better to do it. And if it doesn't work out, you either turn it back or you try something else. And that's, definitely helped me move faster and, lose out on less opportunity or yeah, lose out on less things.
Love the answer. Okay, next one. More challenging to lead a technical team or an investor focused platform?
Ooh, I think it's more challenging to lead a technical team.
Why is that?
I realized this a lot while building Fractional is, people who work in tech, we are definitely in our own bubble of how we think, how we behave, how we act. And that is very different from what, America or what the broader consumer is like as a whole. And, sometimes, like us, we work on Notion all the time and everything there seems really straightforward. But, you bring Notion to, someone who doesn't work in tech, like they have no idea how to use any of those things. So that has been a really big mindset shift that we're still iterating on, within our company is, yeah, I think as tech people, building something that is not, used by tech people is a completely different story. So that is definitely still a work in progress.
I love the answer. Okay, book or mental model that you always return to or you return to frequently?
Mental model that I return to frequently. I mean, it's similar to my first answer. I think it's you kind of need a combination of like the confidence to just do some things, but then also pairing that with like internal reflection and being good about iteration. I think that's like a mental model that I try to practice is I don't want my thoughts to hold me back from taking action, but at the same time, like it can't always just be go, 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 because then you don't actually digest, the feedback or the results of your actions and how you would shift that going forward. So, yeah, that's kind of like the mental model that I always hold is like, okay, let's have those go, go, go moments, but then also be able to, really digest and churn through what were the key takeaways and how would I do things differently and what is my future mindset around those kind of problems. So it's almost like my problem solving is templatized and I have my own decision trees of how to go about things in the future.
Okay, I got a short and precise one for you. You ready?
Let's do it.
How, how do you recognize your own blind spots?
How do I recognize my own blind spots? Talking to more people that are different from me and being open to their perspectives.
I love that answer. Here is why. And I say I love all your answers, but all your answers are so like as a former tech founder, I can relate to a lot of the things you're saying. I do think diversity of thought, diversity of background, and what other people have experienced. There is no reason for you to organically learn everything that others have already been through and had to suffer through. Biggest misconception about raising capital.
Ooh, well, I think the biggest one is that, you can only raise money from rich people, which is the thought that, most people have, right? Like you take money from big check people, they have to be accredited or else it doesn't work. That's literally the grounds that we're breaking is that, we want to make capital raising and just investing as a whole, right? As inclusive and accessible as possible. And when you can do it in a very collaborative setting, then everyone wins. So that is the myth that we're demystifying.
Okay, where can people find you? Who should be reaching out to you? And any one of the listeners to this podcast, what's the one value you can provide for them?
Well, where you can find me, I am always on fractional.app. We still have a lot of the community kind of social components, so you can definitely find me there on pretty much every social media channel you can think of. Hella Stella on Instagram, that's where I keep it, California for everyone. Also on LinkedIn as well. And then one major takeaway, I think this goes back to just being action oriented. Find out the spot where you can really provide unique value. Don't blindly take action, right? Like take action where it can really count, and then just do it. Just do it. Learn from the success, learn from the mistakes, keep iterating, and that's how you keep unlocking new value for yourself and people around you.
And I want to underscore one thing. If you are a listener and you might not be accredited or sophisticated, or you have been told you have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to get started investing in real estate, I really hope that the one takeaway you have got from the show today is, well, that's not true. You can have a few $1,000s, you can find Stella, you can go look at Fractional, and you can start your real estate investment journey already today. Thank you so much for joining us, Stella. I really appreciate that you took the time to join.
Of course, this was super fun. I feel like we could go on forever, so I appreciate you having me, and this was an absolute blast.
Thank you, Stella. And thank you, everyone else who was listening to Adapt or Die. Today's story shows you that no matter how old you are, you can do amazing things in a very short amount of time if you just take step forward and you face your fear, take action. Okay, if you like this podcast or if you think someone else should really benefit or could really benefit from listening to this podcast, I would highly encourage you to share it on Apple Podcast. Just search for Adapt or Die. And while you're at it, please leave a 5-star review and make sure that you follow. If you're more into Spotify, you can find us there as well. And please remember that in leadership, we adapt and thrive or we don't survive. Until next time, bye everyone.